Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining. We'll give people another minute to get through the Zoom labyrinth before we get started, and then Mike will kick things off, and then I'll wrap us up, and we'll have Q&A afterwards. So just hang tight, give us another minute, and we will get started. For those of you who are joining, if you have questions, I'm sure you will have some questions as things go along. But if you came with some questions, go ahead and drop them in the Q&A. When one of us is speaking, the other will monitor it, and we will do our best to hit every question before we wrap things up tonight.
And I'd also say, if you want in the chat, just share on behalf of your teen, assuming that you're not the teen, what what high school graduation year you're working with.
Hopefully the chat is enabled. If the chat is not enabled, I think it is, but if it's not, you can drop that in the Q&A as well.
Awesome.
Good. I like seeing somebody rising junior parent in here. That's
That is the
good.
right time.
Yep, for sure.
When I talk about testing timelines, if I'm talking to parents of seniors, my news isn't very good.
Yeah, it's a little, especially right now, it's a little late, right?
Could be worse. It could be fall of senior
Yeah.
year. Yeah. Okay. So Cynthia, right? You're the parent of a rising senior. Don't worry. The news isn't all bad. But I speak in a lot of schools, and sometimes like I'm speaking in the winter, and I ask like, show of hands, who's a parent of a junior, who's the parent of a sophomore, and I'm like, if you're a parent of a senior, winter of senior year, it's too late.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Very few exceptions there. Good. Well, Mike, what do you say? You want to get us started here? We're a couple
Yeah,
minutes into the
let's.
hour.
Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes, you are good
Can you
to
see this?
go.
Okay, fantastic. So we're going to talk about testing timelines made easy. There is so much to talk about with regard to the SAT and ACT, but I want to shrink our focus down. We'll talk a bit about what the SAT and ACT are, why they matter, and what the ideal testing timelines might be for you and your teens. So I'll tell you a bit about myself. I've been in education for over 30 years. I am the president of Chariot Learning, which is a this boutique SAT, ACT prep practice. We do tutoring and classes for students across the country and sometimes in other countries. And we recently received the distinction of being named one of the top 15 test prep companies in the country, and certainly the smallest of that group. I am the publisher of both the Roots to Words free daily newsletter for vocabulary and the College Eagle college newsletter. I'm the co-host of the Test and the Rest podcast. I hope that some of you listen to that and that more of you will. We are one of the most popular college admissions podcasts. We have over 700 episodes. Tomorrow will be the 730th with my colleague Amy Seeley. I am the founding president and now president emeritus of the National Test Prep Association, which is the nonprofit industry association for test prep. I am a trainer for ACT. I train teachers both in schools and in private practice across the country, both through ACT and as the founder of TestBrite, where I license curriculum to educators and schools in 18 states. So this is just a long way of saying I talk about the SAT and ACT all the time. I speak to experts across the country. I speak to college admissions experts. I just spent last week with over 1,000 college consultants in Baltimore at the IAC National Conference, and I'm always paying attention to what matters in testing and admissions. And one of the things that matter is the choice, like which test you select. Just to clarify what may be some misconceptions out there, The SAT and ACT are both what they've always been, college entrance exams. They're administered all year long. They overlap substantially. Most importantly, they are accepted by all schools equally. There is not a single school or program that I am aware of that prioritizes one over the other. Every student that I know gets into their uh, target schools with either or, right? You don't have to take both. You can take one and excel in it. And sometimes it's advantageous to just focus on one because while they overlap substantially in terms of the math, writing, and reading content that's tested, there are significant differences. They've kind of diverged. They used to overlap a lot more a few years ago, but since the recent changes in the SAT and even more recently the ACT, the two exams are catered to different kinds of students. I'll talk about the differences, and then you can think about your teen and think about who, whether your teen sounds like somebody who's more associated with the kind of reading skills that the SAT prioritizes or the ACT. And we'll do the same for math and we'll do the same for writing. We'll talk about structure. And then I'll give you an easy way and then an accurate way to determine which test might be best for you. Okay. For the SAT, reading is tested in the form of short, relatively short passages. Every reading question has a single passage associated with it that averages about 100 words. SAT reading focuses on critical reasoning. The reading on the SAT can be very dense across all different kinds of topics and also vocabulary. If you grew up with an SAT that tested those big SAT words, there was a period of time when the SAT actually pulled back a bit from that. But ever since the SAT went digital in 2023, they've leaned back into that classic vocabulary. So students should have strong college level vocabularies to tackle some of the toughest words on the exam. The ACT is more a test of reading speed and comprehension in that the ACT sticks with the classic pattern of a long passage with 9 questions per passage. So unlike the SAT where you're reading a passage and then quickly reading, answering a question, then going on to a new passage, you're reading one big passage and then you're answering all different kinds of questions on that one passage. Students who are taking the ACT should feel comfortable with long passages and they should be able to navigate passages. What they'll find is that while there are more words to absorb at once, ACT reading is actually more surface level than SAT reading. You don't have to read as closely. You just have to be able to find information in the text. Both exams incorporate science in that natural science is one of the topics that you're going to see on the reading material on both exams, both on the reading tests, right? The SAT has no dedicated reading section, but it definitely includes natural science and social science passages and plenty of graphs in the reading passages. The ACT has started to incorporate graphs in the reading in what they call VQI passages, visual quantitative information, but ACT also has that famous science section. The science section is very much a graphical literacy section. It's important to point out, though, that since last year, the science section has been optional. It's optional as far as ACT is concerned. The science score does not factor into a student's composite, which is English, math, reading. And the latest trend is that colleges don't seem to be asking for the science section. So currently, we are seeing that the majority of colleges do not care about a student science score. Now, your mileage may vary, and everything that I say regarding trends could be different depending on specific schools. Students should consider this though, and they shouldn't count on science to raise their ACT score because it doesn't factor into the composite. Now, the SAT and ACT both test grammar. By grammar, I mean conventions of standard written English. I'm talking about subject predicate agreement, talking about verb tense on the SAT, modifiers, phrases, clauses, and tons of punctuation rules. And no surprise, a lot of students don't know that information. Most high schools that I deal with, they don't cover that on the high school level, and students need to be seriously reacquainted with the rules. The SAT tests a handful of rules. The SAT tests fewer grammar mechanics than the ACT does, but they test them in great depth, as is the SAT style. The ACT tests a lot more both discrete grammar rules, but also more writing skills on the ACT English test. And then there's a difference between one short passage versus one long passage uh, by section. But ACT English is broader and not quite as deep as SAT writing. And that is a trend that continues to the math section. Okay. Both the SAT and ACT test math skills that students have cultivated across an entire academic career. Most of the time, we focus on the top level math that's tested on the exams, which is in most instances Algebra 2 trigonometry. Students should definitely have Algebra 2 under their belt if they are going after the SAT. They need a good amount of Algebra 2 and trig for the ACT as well. Both exams test other skills, though. They test lots of geometry, algebra, and even arithmetic and statistics. And the emphasis on both exams is not just on calculation and rote memorization of information, but problem solving and conceptual understanding. So the SAT is much more of an algebra test, and students need to be really strong problem solvers. One of the great things about the SAT in Blue Book is that it has an embedded Desmos calculator. But students should bring their graphic or scientific calculators and know when to use that device and also know when to use paper and pencil. The ACT tests a broader range of math skills. There are a lot of math concepts that are not tested on the SAT that you'll see on the ACT, but the toughest questions on the ACT aren't really as tough as the SAT questions, in my experience. The ACT includes more word problems, less graphing. The ACT can be taken both on paper and device. If you take a digital ACT, you will have access to an embedded Desmos calculator. However, I strongly recommend that if students have the option, they always select the paper test. Right now, the paper ACT is a better fit for the structure of that exam in the same way that the SAT has been redesigned to be better in Blue Book. And in fact, you can't even take a paper SAT. Okay, other considerations. The SAT Blue Book is amazing. It has very strong testing features. The SAT is an adaptive test, and you don't know exactly how much each question is worth, but you still have that feeling like you're answering fewer questions. It's not exactly true. The ACT, if you're not counting the science test, is actually 5 minutes faster than the SAT, and you can take it on paper. The ACT also offers a benefit that the SAT does not, and that's that 3 times a year, this year it's April, June, and October, you can take advantage of what's called an MAK, a My Answer Key, where you take the test and you can actually get a clean copy of the test that you took and your answers and review it. And that's a great opportunity. That's something that will never happen or has never happened yet and likely won't happen in the future for the SAT. The test that you take will be different than the test that a lot of other people take because they play around with a lot of different forms and they're not releasing old exams. Now, the way to choose, the easy way is this. The SAT is much more of a math test. 50% of your score is based on math. As far as the math goes, it's definitely throwing tougher questions at students, a lot more algebra and graphing, a lot more problem solving. Also, on the reading side, students need to bring strong vocabulary and critical reasoning skills. If a student is better on the reading and writing side, they identify that way, there's a good chance they're going to find that the ACT shows off their strengths to greater effect because the ACT score is two-thirds reading and English, one-third math. Students should come to this test very comfortable working with long passages and being able to find information in text, being able to move more quickly, having a greater breadth of information, even if they don't bring tremendous depth. That's the easy way to figure out. That's a good way to get a start, but I strongly recommend that a student take one or both exams in practice to determine which test is better for them. And what you can do is you can take either of them and then speak to a professional like me, take both the SAT and ACT and compare their percentiles. Uh, go with what, go with what feels comfortable, but also gives you a good score. Don't take an official test just to find out how you're going to do. A lot of people do that and they miss an opportunity. And also, there are still a couple of schools left that want to see every single exam. Most schools are either their score choice or super score, but why put a test on your permanent record that you haven't prepared for? Students should prepare for every official exam that they take. Now, I'm going very quickly because I have a lot to talk about still. Okay. Why do the SAT and ACT matter? Let's be clear. They matter for college admissions, and that's it, right? College admissions, college scholarship, which Dave can speak to at length, uh, in that many merit scholarships are based on both test scores and grades. Okay. There's a strong submitter advantage at a lot of schools in that even schools that say they're test optional accept submitters at a higher rate. And this year was the first year in a while where test submitters outnumbered non-submitters. And this trend is only going to continue because fewer and fewer schools are optional. Okay. Also, these exams are great tests of college readiness, and that each score has benchmarks that signal a likelihood of passing college algebra or English 101, just knowing that you're going to get through your first year of college classes. Now, when you should take the test is a really important consideration. And the earlier we ask these questions, the better answers we come up with. Here are all the test dates in terms of months thrown up on one page, right? And all the red months are ACT months, and all the bluish, I don't know exactly what color you'd want to call this, all the bluish dates are SAT months. You see that you have more SAT options in a year. You also see that there is an asterisk next to July. Now, I start with July because July is the beginning of the academic year. If we assume that an academic year ends at the end of classes, right? That's either May or June, depending on where you live. That makes July and the ACT in July the first test of the next academic year. Now, the July ACT is offered mid-month, and I always put asterisks next to it because this exam is not offered in New York, and a lot of the people I speak to are in New York because that's where I am. And I don't feel like if you go to school in New York or in the Northeast, you might not be missing out because school lets out so late in June. Students aren't really ready for an exam mid-July. I think this year it's July 11th. However, if you let out in May, then the July exam is a great opportunity to get a test in over the summer. The August SAT is an extremely popular exam, and I strongly recommend this exam for all rising seniors who have not yet earned the scores that they want, and any rising junior who's already taken Algebra 2. Algebra 2 is a really important subject for the SAT, and it's pretty important for the ACT. If you're trying to get a really good ACT math score, you need to be comfortable with Algebra 2. If you're trying to get an average score, you could probably get really far with geometry, algebra, arithmetic, statistics, and some topics that you pick up. But if you're going for a very high score, you should be really strong with Algebra 2. Uh, the August SAT is one of the most popular test dates of the year. If you are targeting the August SAT and you haven't registered yet, you should consider doing so quickly. Okay, now One of the reasons why the August SAT is so great is because the College Board also added a September test. Uh, it should go without saying, but I guess I should emphasize. Another reason why the August date is so great is because summer is the best time to prep. Unless a student is going away for the summer, spending the whole time at camp or, visiting family in other states, they're just busy, they're working all the time. Students will never be more free to focus on prep than when school is out. So I see summer as the busiest time for those of us that support students because we're working with lots of rising juniors and seniors, and students can work all day long. They have opportunities to prep, and the amount of prep that a student needs to do in the summer is not so much that they're not going to still be able to have as good a time as they want. And also, a little prep over the summer can stave off that summer slide. Uh, Another reason why the SAT in August is great is because there is a test in September just a few weeks later. This past year, College Board added a September SAT, and it fits in beautifully because students have a stretch where from late August to mid-October, they have opportunities to take three official exams. This is really powerful because anytime you're taking one of these tests, you have to recognize that your performance on any given day might not reflect your very best ability, and you want to have an opportunity to test again, especially in an environment where so many schools either accept your best single score or a score choice, where they'll take your best section scores. You want to capitalize on that flexibility and plan to take multiple tests. So the August, September, October run is beautiful for SAT test takers. It's the September SAT, it's early in the month. It's ideal for juniors and seniors, and same for the ACT. The ACT in September, ideal for students that prepped over the summer. This is the exam that students can prepare for mostly without having been in school. And then, they're in school for a week or 2 weeks and things really haven't gotten busy yet. And they can take the test. And every year I see students that prepare over the summer. They take an August or September exam. They get the score they're looking for. They're already finished. October is an important date on the testing calendar because it's still a date where students are, if they prepped over the summer, they have October. They can still be working towards the October date. The October SAT and ACT are the last exams available for seniors who want to submit early decision or early action applications. So this is important. In the past, the ACT didn't come in time for those EDEA applications, but it does now, and that makes things a lot easier. Also, keep in mind for rising juniors, October is PSAT month, and a student who is hoping to earn a National Merit Scholarship, who is hoping to score 99th percentile, should be taking the SAT when they're prepared to do it. A lot of families wait until the October PSAT to even decide when the student's going to test. And you're missing a great opportunity. If you're listening to this and you're the parent of a rising junior, if your student is strong, they should be prepping over the summer. They should be testing early in the fall. I know a lot of students for whom the October PSAT is their last test. They've already nailed the scores that they want in August, September, October. They take the PSAT hoping for National Merit Scholarship qualification. November, there's an SAT, and December is the last test of the calendar year. There is an SAT the first weekend of December, an ACT the second week of December. For a lot of juniors, if a junior already had Algebra 2, I really like to see December as the last time they're testing. If you've been through this before, by this I mean supporting students through the current version of high school, then you know that junior year gets busier as it goes on. And for ambitious students, students that are juggling all kinds of honors courses, um, doing lots of activities, things like that, what they find is that the year begins slowly as teachers are just getting their footing and they're relaxed. But as time goes on, teachers realize how much they forgot to teach and they start piling on more assignments. And at the same time, things happen in the spring. We've got in the Northeast, we've got winter break. Everybody has spring break. We've got prom. We've got APs. We've got lots of distractions towards the second half of junior year. So students that can earn their best scores by December are well positioned to then focus on everything else that matters. You don't have to do it, but it is a nice target, especially because if a student, say, takes the December test, they still have the February ACT or the March SAT as a backup. Okay. February ACT, first test of the new year, occurs in mid-February. Uh, it's a great test for students who were busy with fall activities and then they leaned into prep and maybe took the December test, or maybe they didn't even start prep until late December, early January. Same for the March SAT. I consider March SAT the last SAT that any student taking two or more APs should consider. And this flies in the face of anyone who still remembers the old paradigm that juniors should test or students should test at the end of junior year and then again in senior year if necessary. Today's juniors, the ones who are preparing for selective college admissions, have too many activities and honors classes on their plates. When you're busy in the spring with APs, with finals, with IB responsibilities, on top of everything else, the SAT and ACT are not a good fit. To do your best on these exams, you have to be able to take them, prepare for them, and take them at a moment when you can focus. So think about March as the last date that a student who is taking a number of APs will be serious about. You can take a June test. It just doesn't always work out, right? April is the last ACT that a student taking APs should be considering. That is by the time the April ACT is over, students are turning to their real AP preparation. But it's mid-month. Another issue with the April ACT is that it often falls on one of the weekends of most schools' spring breaks, but your mileage may vary depending on where you live and go to school. The April ACT is still a great date. Okay. Whereas the May date, not a great date at all for students who are taking AP exams. I don't recommend it, but there are a lot of students who were busy in the fall, busy in the spring, busy in the winter, just started prepping. And of course, the May exam is reasonable. Just be careful because often the May and or June tests interfere with prom. June is our last test of the academic year. Okay. The first weekend of June is the SAT. The second weekend of June is the ACT. I will never dissuade a student from taking the test if they still need to test and they don't want to wait until July or August to test again. In my experience, though, students that are targeting June are often mentally exhausted by the time they get to it. The academic year is long, it's a bit of a slog, and by the time June rolls around, especially for students that exerted themselves heavily in spring activities, APs, finals, IBs, they just don't have a lot of brain power left for this exam. So even when they're willing, they might not be able. Ideally, you'll look at the calendar, you'll think about when your teens are most busy and when they have windows, a 2 to 3 month window where, I mean, obviously, if you're not prepping over the summer, it's school and you have to manage school and grades are still the most important factor in admissions for almost every student. But if they're not also juggling their primary sport or their main activity or they're the lead in the winter musical, they can fit in test prep and they can take tests and be able to think about those tests. These are exams are great competitions, right? You really have to be able to focus to bring your best under stress. And it's easier to do that when you have relatively few obligations to contend with. So that is a whirlwind review of the calendar. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to ask you to, I don't see any questions. So we're going to hold questions for now, and then we're going to answer questions at the end.
That was great, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Give me just a moment here to pull up my slides. Can you confirm, Mike, that you can see that?
Yes.
All right, thank you. All right. So I too am going to be talking about timelines. Mine is not as granular as Mike's because scholarship timelines really depend a lot on the student. So I'm going to approach it more from a high level, and hopefully you can plug this in for where your student is in lots of different factors. But first, I do want to introduce myself. I'll start there. And then I want to kind of set the stage with the three types. It's actually 3.5 types of scholarships so that we're all on the same page. And then I'm going to share a few scholarship resources with everyone. So, who is Dave the Scholarship Coach? Well, I got into the world of scholarships because when my son was first and second year of high school, we knew he was college bound. And it occurred to me, I need to find out what college costs these days. And then I had the heart attack after I looked at what the costs are and realized we were nowhere near what we needed to be in terms of savings to pay for college. I knew that scholarships existed, so I spent the next close to a year educating myself on how scholarships worked. My son started applying for scholarships as a high school junior, and he won three scholarships that year. Senior year, he we went all in as a family. It was very much a team process. The day he graduated high school, he had earned 18 scholarships. We got him sent off to college, and I'll circle back to him in a second. But because of his success with scholarships, a lot of friends and family asked for my help with their kids. And so for the next year, I worked with some friends and family's kids, and it was that process that made me realize that while every student's scholarship journey is going to be different, there are enough commonalities that the process is very similar. There are lots of tactics and strategies that will work for many students. So that was why I started my business scholarship GPS to kind of close the loop with my son. He is now a college graduate, has been for a few years. We only spent $1,500 for his degree. He ultimately ended up earning 23 scholarships, and that covered everything except for 1,500 bucks. So that's how I got into the world of scholarships. And basically, my role now as a scholarship coach is to work with students and families, helping them identify scholarships and helping them through the application process, and hopefully helping them, win as many scholarships as possible. My goal is always for students to be able to go through college debt free. So enough about me. Let's talk about the types. Like I said, 3.5 types of scholarships. We'll start with need-based scholarships, and these are based on the student's family's income and assets. Um, just about every college in the country uses the FAFSA, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. There are other colleges that use something called the CSS profile, and then there are just a few outliers that don't use either that have their own forms. But need-based scholarships come from the colleges themselves. And most middle-class families are very shocked when they fill out the FAFSA to find out just how wealthy the government thinks they are, because no matter what your income is, how much you're struggling to pay for gas these days and groceries and the cost of living, FAFSA seems to think that you have just this great ability to pay for college. A family I worked with whose household income was a little under $100,000. FAFSA came back saying, "Oh, you guys could easily pay almost $25,000 a year for your students." So, um, need-based scholarships, unless you are just, very low income with very little assets, um, it's not something that most of the families that I work with, at least, can really count on. I do also want to talk about student loans here because this kind of falls into that need-based category. There have been some recent changes to federal student loans that definitely impact class of 2027 and younger. And that is that students can only borrow $23,000 for their undergraduate degree over the course of the 4 years. They can borrow 5,500 the first year, 6,500 second year, and then 7,500 the 2 years after that. Beyond that $23,000, and I'm speaking to the parents and guardians here, you are going to be on the hook for the rest of the any loans that you are able to secure. But that game has changed as well. You can only now, as a parent, borrow $65,000 for student loans per student in your lifetime. So if you, like me, I father of a only child, if I was still in this and I needed to borrow money for student loans, my lifetime cap would be $65,000. So if you look at the cost of college and then you figure, okay, between my kid and myself, we can borrow, what is that, $88,000? That's not going to cover 4 years of college. So there's going to be a gap that you are going to have to fund. Now, there is the private student loan market. Obviously, as I said a minute ago, my goal is to help families avoid student loans. But if you're keeping student loans on the table, the private student loan market is out there, but you do have to have pretty good credit, especially if you want to avoid things like 14, 16% interest rates. So, all right, enough about student loans. Let's talk about scholarships. So, my little timeline here is one thing that's very important to know for rising seniors, and that is that the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, typically opens on October 1st. It actually opened a little earlier this past year. But this is your gateway for need-based scholarships and for federal student loans. So keep that October date in mind. That again is when it should open. And I always encourage every family to complete the FAFSA, even if you don't think you're going to qualify for need-based aid. Many colleges require it to even be considered for merit aid, and we'll talk about what merit aid is in a minute. But for the most part, the FAFSA is a very simple process. Most families are able to simply allow FAFSA to access your tax records, your IRS records, and it's a pretty simple and quick process. So always encourage families to fill out the FAFSA. Oh, there we go. All right, so that brings us to the second type of scholarships, merit-based scholarships, and these are based on the student's proven abilities. Just like need-based aid, merit-based scholarships come from the colleges themselves, and they are based on the student's resume. For most students, that's going to be their academic resume, but would also lump into this scholarships for artistic students or athletic students. So, the star quarterback who gets a full ride to Florida State, that's a type of merit scholarship. It's just for us mere mortals, not the type of scholarship that most of us are going to be chasing. For most students, the higher their GPA and the higher their test scores, the more merit-based scholarships that they are going to be offered or able to earn. I do want to kind of reiterate something that Mike said. This is a quote from a parent that I worked with, class of 2026. Thanks to his standardized test scores, he'll be attending college on a full tuition scholarship. So, one of the best investments of time and resources would be good test prep, good solid test prep, because that is one of the best ways to guarantee merit aid from the colleges that your students will be applying to. Some colleges have a merit aid grid right on their website, and you can see the exact combination of GPA and test score that the student needs to get whatever scholarship you are hoping to achieve. So, working with somebody like Mike is a great way to chase merit aid. You hear that term online all the time. My students chasing merit aid, and if you're going to do that, test prep should be a big part of that. So, in our timeline here, we're plugging in, get your target score ASAP. This is how you're going to get merit aid. Mike did a great job of showing, particularly for, any student who has completed Algebra 2, what these dates are over the next 12 months that you can target to hopefully get that score that you want, so that you can move on to other things, whether it's college applications or scholarships. I'm hoping you're going to be doing scholarships simultaneously because, as we'll see in the timeline, that's going to be the first thing on my personal timeline for everybody. All right, so third type of scholarships, private scholarships, and these are largely based on how much time and effort students put into these. Unlike the first two types of scholarships, these don't come from the colleges. These instead come from businesses and philanthropic organizations. So big multinationals like Coca-Cola down to, the church down the street from you. These scholarships can be used at any college in the country, and if the student transfers, which anywhere from 25% to a third of students do transfer during their time in college, those funds follow the student. It's the student's money to be used for whatever college they're attending. For us, this was incredibly important. This was two-thirds of the scholarships that my son earned. So, without these private scholarships, we certainly would have not been able to get him through debt-free, and certainly would not have spent only $1,500 on his degree. The other cool thing about some of these scholarships is that some of them pay the student directly. So it can be a little bit of extra money in your student's pocket, which is particularly great if you say do earn a full tuition scholarship from, whatever college your student ends up going to. These funds could be used for things like room, board, books, fees, travel expenses, anything else related to college. Um, I said these were very important for our family, but this is another student and mom that I worked with. This is Talon. She describes him as a very average student. Talon would not have been this type of student who was chasing, a full tuition scholarship based on test scores. And I say he's an average student because that's the way his mom described him. He ultimately went on to earn over $110,000, and I'm pretty sure that number has jumped. I don't have the latest stats for him, but he continues to apply for and earn scholarships in college. Just about every penny that he earned came from private scholarships. He earned a very small merit scholarship from the community college that he started at. And in fact, he had so many private scholarships come in his first year of college that they actually sent him a refund check of $24,000. So, private scholarships can be very lucrative for students who may not, well, they can be lucrative for anybody, but they're particularly attractive for students who might not qualify for merit aid from the colleges that they're looking at. All right, so I'm saying today, start applying for private scholarships. And I mean, literally, if you have a student in school, even as young as kindergarten, there are scholarships that your student can apply for. Now, obviously, a kindergartner doesn't have as many opportunities as a high school senior. But one of the things I see is that many students and families miss a lot of scholarship opportunities because they think they're only open to seniors. The truth is, there are many scholarships open to high school students of all ages, including for juniors, rising juniors, there is a full tuition scholarship that you lose that opportunity by the time senior year starts. And there's a full ride scholarship that's only open to juniors. So, regardless of where your student is in their high school career, there are definitely scholarship opportunities for them. Now, I said that there was 3.5 categories of scholarships, and that is because there's a kind of overlap between merit-based scholarships from the colleges versus they're not private scholarships, but they're not automatic like merit aid is. And these are competitive institutional scholarships. So they still come from the colleges, but unlike most merit aid, which is awarded automatically based on factors like GPA and test scores, these require separate applications. And many, many families miss these because of two things. One, they don't even know about them. Two, they may be aware of them, but they think the student has to have accepted the admission offer. That is almost always incorrect. Most of these scholarships are open to any student who has applied to the college, whether they've been accepted or admitted or not. And in fact, many of these competitive scholarships close before the admissions decision has even been made. So, as we're talking about these, this is Tegan. I worked with her this year. She's a class of 2026 grad. She earned a competitive full tuition scholarship from the college she will be attending in the fall. She also earned multiple outside scholarships, but the point is she had to apply for all of these. And I have a podcast that came out, maybe it was this last weekend, I can't remember, but it's an interview with her and her family. And they basically said that the practice that she had applying for scholarships prior to even applying for this full tuition scholarship from her college gave her the practice and the experience that she needed so that she ended up earning this full tuition scholarship from her college. So as we look at our timeline, I said start applying for private scholarships immediately. Get your target SAT or test score that you want as soon as possible. But then once you start applying to colleges, know what the scholarship policy is for each one. Check every college that your student's applying for, and know if there are competitive scholarships that they need to apply for. Ideally, that's going to happen before that October 1st FAFSA opens. So again, a little bit more vague timeline without specific dates, except for that October 1st FAFSA. But you get the idea. The earlier you start thinking about these things, the earlier you start taking action, the more opportunities your student has to earn scholarships as well as to get better at earning scholarships. All right, let me close with some scholarship resources. I have a couple freebies for you. I have a daily newsletter, just like Mike does. His is awesome, highly recommended. Um, Mine is called Your Daily Scholarship. Monday through Friday, I feature a different scholarship. Saturday, I feature what I call weekender scholarships. These are low effort, usually no essay scholarships, but they're legit. They do pick winners. Certainly, students shouldn't put all their eggs in the no essay basket, but they're worth throwing your hat in the ring. Sundays, I have interviews with people like Mike and other college admissions experts. And all of that is repackaged. If you're not looking for a newsletter, I lost my mouse. Uh-oh. This isn't good. There we go. Um, Everything's repackaged into an audio podcast, which is available on all the major platforms. I recap every scholarship that I feature during the week, plus, of course, those interviews. And I have started putting my interviews onto to YouTube as well. So both of those are free. If you're not already following me on one of those, please do. I do feel like I share a lot of valuable information there. I do want to talk about my scholarship summer camp. Just like summer is a great time to work on test prep, summer is a great time to not only learn the scholarship process, but actually apply for some scholarships. And so that's why I put my scholarship summer camp together. It is a combination of on-demand, pre-recorded videos going through a systematic approach to scholarships, plus a weekly live session where I give a little recap, and then of course we have discussion and I take Q&A from the participants. Each lesson is very bite-sized. I know this is summer, and hopefully students are going to have some fun, but they're also going to maybe do some test prep and learn how to do scholarships. But I want these lessons to be very short and actionable. Each video is no more than 15 minutes. Maybe there might be an outlier that's 15 minutes and 20 seconds. I'm not going to quibble about that, but very short lessons, and we go through things over the course of 6 weeks. And weeks 4, 5, and 6, students apply for actual scholarships. They get guided assistance from me. So, what does that look like? Week 1, we talk about the tools for scholarship success. Everything from things like their resume and transcripts to a few other things that students need to have on hand. Week 2, we talk about the student's personal narrative. This is really critical. I have yet to see a student have large amounts of scholarship success without building a standout personal narrative. This is what scholarships are looking for. Week 3, we talk about how and where to find the right scholarships to match the student's profile. And then week 4, we actually dive in and start applying for scholarships. We answer the very common essay prompt, why do you deserve to win this scholarship? Week 5, we apply for a topical scholarship. So we kind of shift the focus away from the student to just a fun topic. It's a great time to do it over the summer because there's a particular scholarship that pretty much every student I think will have fun with. And then week 6, we apply for a what I call the Capstone Scholarship Project, which is a $35,000 scholarship. The scholarship awards almost $2 million annually at the local, state, and national levels. And more than half of the students I work with who do apply for the scholarship earn monetary prizes. So it's a fantastic scholarship. I recommend it highly. The scholarship summer camp is only $97, but for attending the webinar tonight, I am offering a 20% discount. You can scan that QR code to get there to register and then use the coupon code webinar before June 1st. I'm actually offering the camp twice this year. June 1st, so next week we'll be starting. And then I have a second round that I will do starting July 27th. So 2 opportunities. And with that, I think we are going to wrap up the presentation and see what questions we have.
Dave, while you take a look at the scholarship questions in the chat, I'll just confirm that Dave's newsletter is a must read. If you're not already getting it, you should.
And likewise for Mike's. And I will also say that that vocabulary piece that you talked about, Mike, in the standardized test, your daily newsletter is perfect for that. It's a great way to very low key, low effort, we'll say, to for students to learn some vocabulary for the tests.
The kids appreciate the low key learning, and the you know it all comes down to timing. Just like we're talking about the if you do what you should do at the right time, then everything's easy, or at least easier. And the right time to learn vocabulary is as early as possible and for as long as possible. I didn't set up my soapbox and start talking about the importance of reading, but
I was going to bring that up, Mike. I was going to ask you, what is the one thing that you always recommend students do that's not looked at as standard test prep?
no, and that's it. And that
Yeah.
reading piece should begin as early as possible. And for the students who they used to be strong readers and then school became too much for them, summer is a fantastic time for kids to reacquaint themselves for at least 15 minutes a day with any kind of reading material that pleases them.
Good. All right. So I had to quickly recharge my mouse because it died in the middle there, and so I couldn't get to these questions. If all right, good question from Aaron. If you earn outside scholarships, does that reduce your need-based financial aid? The answer is very likely. That does vary by college, but I'm going to say if you are talking strictly about need-based financial aid, yes, it's what's called scholarship displacement. Um, there is a spectrum of full displacement where every outside scholarship dollar you bring in displaces what a dollar of the school is offering. At the very other end of the spectrum is full scholarship stacking, where no matter how much the school is giving you in aid, you can keep stacking dollars, even up to like we saw with Talon, where they're going to cut you a check for it with a refund. Most schools fall somewhere in the middle. In my experience, most schools actually have a full stacking policy up to the total cost of attendance, but that is something that you want to check with each college that your student is applying to. And also, understanding those differences between need-based and merit-based scholarships. When you are talking about need-based aid, it does make sense that if a student's bringing in outside scholarships, they don't quite have that same need as before. So do take that into consideration. And then another question, why are CapEx and other search engines so bad? I've wasted hours going down rabbit holes only to find a disqualifying factor in the scholarship. Yeah, so I have a resource. Aaron, I'll have your email address. I will send it to you. It's about a dozen scholarship websites that I do recommend. CapEx is not one. Now, I will say none of them are perfect. Um, so yes, they will match the student with some scholarships that maybe are not a great fit. Some are better than others. And in the document I'll send you, I note that a little bit. I also just wrote an article, a blog article that came out on my website yesterday. Because one of the things I often see parents saying is that scholarships are a scam and that they get so much spam. And I think it's important to differentiate between scholarship search database sites. Again, CapEx is not one I really recommend, but something like a scholarships.com or a scholarships 360. Um, oh, you're welcome, Aaron. So those sites are basically just databases of legitimate scholarships, and most of these sites do a pretty good job of vetting the scholarships. They don't always do a good job of scrubbing the scholarship after it's expired, but it was a legit scholarship at one time. So I will send that to you, Aaron. And awesome, looking forward to seeing you in the camp. Do we have any other questions?
If you don't have any testing timeline questions right now, but they come up later, don't hesitate to contact me. Anyone who's attending this call can feel free to reach out to me, and I will share some time to help you figure out your own ideal testing timeline.
Good. Well, I guess we'll wait one more minute to see if anybody has anything else. Mike, I want to thank you for your time this evening. As always, I'm always just amazed that I get to share a stage, a virtual stage with somebody of your stature and expertise.
You too kind, Dave. As far as I'm concerned, you're the leading expert in scholarship. And just for those of you listening, I don't just say that. Dave worked with my daughter.
Thanks. And I would say, Mike, if we had known you, you would have worked with my son. And he is looking at graduate school. So I don't know. Do you do stuff for GRE?
No, but I'll get him. I'll point him in the right direction.
All right, thank you. Good. Well, thank you
Yeah,
everybody
Aaron,
who
to
was
answer
able
your
to attend.
question, I'm recommending that before students sign up for the science section of the ACT, they reach out to the schools they're interested in. If a student is early in the process and he or she doesn't know where they're going, you have nothing to lose by sitting for the test, right? Like you can take the ACT with science, that score will be there. It won't work against you if a school doesn't look at it. And if a school does look at it, then they'll see it. So there's nothing wrong with taking it. I'm just concerned at the trend right now that schools say that they're not looking at it at all. I'm surprised by that. Uh, so it's not that taking the science test is such a big deal. It's really not. It's a reading test more than anything else. And I know a lot of students do pretty well on it, even if they don't prepare. But if a student is stuck for time or has already sat for the ACT and they have a science score, they certainly don't need another one.
Mike, I actually have a question for you. Several schools, maybe several's not the right word, at least a handful of schools this week announced that they are eliminating their supplemental essay.
That's correct.
Is
Tulane is one of them, right? There were a number of schools.
is that a trend you think will continue? And what does that say for the importance of standardized tests?
So it's interesting because every aspect of the college application comes under scrutiny at one time or another. The testing has already had its time under the microscope for now. It'll come back, but
Mhm,
schools are moving towards preferring or requiring tests again. The big challenge in our AI infused society is to determine original work. And
mhm,
so schools are contending with the fact that they can't always tell whether students write their essays or not. And also the fact that the supplemental essays for some schools have turned out to be of marginal utility. And colleges are looking for ways to bring efficiency to their process. And the supplemental essays are just kind of like an extra step. And if you think about all of the different important factors, with grades being first and foremost the most important for most applicants, you've got test scores, you've got activities, you've got your uh, Common App essay, you've got demonstrated interest, you've got a slew of other things. Supplemental essays are just low down, and paying readers to read all of those essays and then finding that they don't really influence acceptance rates makes them seem gratuitous, at least to the schools in
mhm,
question. But I wouldn't be surprised if a month from now, 10 or more schools also join the chorus.
mhm. Yeah. Yep. And we saw the same thing with testing coming back into being required or at least preferred, right? Where, COVID, many schools dropped it, and then in the years following, many have added testing
Absolutely.
back into a major factor.
I think what we all have to recognize is that the college admissions process, as stressful as it is for all of us, it's stressful for colleges too.
Mm.
Every aspect of college admissions is of existential importance to a higher ed institution. And it's a big cost center. And it's also an area where the better choices they make, the more likely the students they accept will attend. They'll get a higher yield and will remain through to graduation, which is really important. Like schools really do want the right fit, just the same way students should really want the right fit. So
Yeah.
I appreciate how admissions offices are always willing to review the process and think about how they can make better choices because those choices should reflect better fit for applicants.
Got one more question that came in, Mike. Um,
What is the BBB? Oh, I think that has to do with financial aid and loans. There is something about loans that's changing, but
Oh,
I
the
don't.
big beautiful bill.
Yeah,
That's what it refers to. Okay. So is there still college and take summer that will inspect current college aid? Um, I have to be honest, I don't know the answer to that. Aside from what I mentioned today about the need to fill out the FAFSA or the strong suggestion to fill out the FAFSA, I do not get involved in student loans or anything like that. So I will have to defer that to somebody else. I'll
yeah,
if
that's not something I cover either. I think that this is
yeah.
impacted. I think they've gotten rid of Parent Plus loans or something like that. So
It-
there's definitely an
yeah, well
impact if
they
you're taking loans.
yeah, and I think what I do think there is something that somebody who is already in the system, we'll call it, they might be able to do something to get by some of those limits that I mentioned. But yeah, I'm afraid I don't want to speak on something that I don't know. Yes, we are recording, and the recording will be sent out to all registrants. Good. Well, if there are no more questions, thank you again, everybody, for attending. Mike, thank you again as well.
Thank you, Dave. And
And
thanks everybody for coming.
great. All right, everyone. Have a great evening. Thank you.